Hello and welcome back to the Motorsport Baithak podcast. I'm your host DD and joining me today once again is my friend and your co-host Vedant. On this episode, we'll be wrapping up the season 7 of the Formula E World Championship. So let's grab some chai, take our seats, ready our opinions and dive right into the conversation. Hello Vedant, what a great weekend of racing it has been so far, and what a way to wrap up the World Championship. Nyck de Vries winning in his second year, taking the World Drivers' Championship by just 7 points, not even getting into the three figures, but what a season it has been for him. And what a season for Mercedes, again winning the World Championship in their second season with Nyck de Vries and Stoffel van Dorn. But, coming from behind this weekend, didn't have any points going into the last round this morning, but coming out on top both in the Drivers' and Constructors' Championship. What are your thoughts?
I mean, it was incredible, Let's leave apart the final race where we saw 3 title contenders crash out in the first few laps. Even without that, for Mercedes to come out as champions after not scoring a single point in 7 out of the 15 races, like not scoring in half the races almost, it's just incredible how dominant they are and the level of performance they have maintained when they were performing.
Absolutely, taking the Constructors' Championship by just 4 points. And, like I mentioned just right now, was none of the drivers broke the three figures mark, so it goes to show how close the championship was. And obviously, all across the social media, we had people telling us that there were 14 drivers going into the race who were, contending for the World Championship. However, realistically, especially after the qualifying, there were only like 4 or 5 drivers who were in contention, especially Mitch Evans, who everyone was, betting on Mitch Evans to win the World Championship after he was the only one to qualify for Super Pole from, Group 1. So obviously he put in the hard work in qualifying, but, just heartbreak at the start for Mitch Evans. You got to really feel from him. And then who crashes into him? Eduardo Mortara, the top 2 contenders for the championship. And just heartbreak. And then, after that, you're like, all right, fine. Who's the next closest person? Jake Dennis crashes out after the red flag restart in less than, 5 laps. So after that, it was just a matter of fact for Nyck de Vries to bring his Mercedes home in one piece and just get across that finish line without losing any points to any of his fellow contenders, whether that was Da Costa, Verne, or Robin Fries, who was starting P18 a long way back to be able to really challenge Nyck de Vries for the title.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Nyck de Vries got 4 points from the final race, and even if he had not finished the race and got 0 points, and the other results would have been the same, he would still have won the World Championship. So after those first few laps, it was just a matter of bringing the car home and hoping that the others don't outperform you.
But yes, but don't count those 4 points out. He might have still won the World Championship, but Mercedes might not have won the World Constructors. I don't know how it would have played out, but Mercedes won the Constructors by just 4 points.
So they would have been sitting
level with. They would have been sitting level with Jaguar Racing Team at 177 points had Nyck de Vries not scored any points at all. But not to take away from the fact that Norman Nato got his first win today. He's had a tough season so far, but he's finished on a high, and hopefully going into next season he can really help Rocket Venturi Racing be a serious title contender, because we saw Eduardo Mortara throughout the season, especially in the second half, be towards the top 6 in the championship, but he didn't have support from Norman Nato that he would have needed to finish the championship as a winner, or help Susie Wolf, turn around and make Rocket Venturi Racing a title contender. So hopefully next season we'll see that happening. However, before we jump that far, we're going to talk about Jake Dennis. What a season he's had, rookie season in Formula E, but finishes 3rd in the championship. BMW are going out next season, so what does that mean for him? He's proved himself to be a talent in Formula E, so will he get snapped up by another team going into next season?
See, 2 teams leaving Formula E at the end of this season, Audi and BMW. Now that leaves us with 4 great drivers, right? So now we don't talk about the silly season in Formula E very much, but it is on. It is very much on. And I mean, Lucas Di Grassi, who does not want Lucas Di Grassi, right? René Rast has shown that he can perform in single-seaters as well. And
Renaros is a massive talent. We've seen him throughout the championship. He might not have scored points as much, and he's had his fair share of bad luck. But Renaros is always there, making up plays. He's one of the most aggressive drivers on the grid. He's the one you can count on to make up the most places on sheer pace on a race day. But definitely his energy management skills need a little bit of need to be fine tuned a little more, so that he can, because usually when he makes up places, he ends up losing a few of them because of his energy management towards the end of the race. But if he can get that under control, René Rast is a serious contender for a world championship on any day of the week.
absolutely. And from BMW, Maxi Gunter and Jake Dennis. Now, for me, Jake Dennis has been the biggest surprise of this season, because going into the season, no one expected a lot from him, because obviously it's his rookie season, and like unlike Nick Cassidy, he was not a superstar stepping into Formula E as such, right? But being in title contention in your rookie season in a car like BMW, which was not the fastest car throughout, is super impressive. And I think he's hot property right now, because while Lucas Di Grassi is like the best of this bunch as with his record, but Jake Dennis with his youth and his drive, I suppose, is the hottest property of this bunch. So it's going to be a very, very interesting transfer market.
Absolutely, and not just that. Also news coming out before the race this morning that Mercedes will not be sticking around for the third generation of Formula E. Kind of heartbreaking, especially when they're just when they've just won the world championship, both the drivers and the constructors. So really surprising news there from the Mercedes EQ family. But they'll be around for another season, for the 2021-2022 season with the Gen 2 cars. So maybe there's another title there for Nyck de Vries and Stoffel Vandoorne to win. But where do they go from there? Obviously, the Twitter went a little crazy when Mercedes announced that, and they're like, are they moving to Williams? But you have to remember that 2021-2022 season, will be run across the 2022 year. It starts in 2021, which we'll talk about later on. So they can't be possibly moving to Williams at the start of the Formula One calendar. So obviously, Williams will not be having Nyck de Vries and Stoffel Vandoorne in the seats next year. So, but where do they go after that? We have had some news that earlier in the year, this year, that McLaren might have might be looking at joining Formula E in 2023 once the Gen 3 cars come in. But then McLaren committed to Extreme E, so they're more likely not to join Formula E anymore, and especially they have increased their investment in IndyCar. But Nyck de Vries and Stoffel Vandoorne are probably the hottest drivers in Formula E today, and will be until the next season starts at least. And we've seen Stoffel Vandoorne perform consistently throughout the season. That man has a lot of bad luck. If you count the number of times he lost out on a win this season, I think he would have at least 50 odd more points in the bag, and leading the championship comfortably going into the last race of the season. And he also started in pole today, and got a 18 or 19 point haul for the Mercedes EQ team, making their constructors championship possible. So where are they going after the next season? We know that Mahindra Racing, they had a disappointing season, but they're getting Oliver Rowland into the seat instead of Alex Lynn.
No, it's not
Alexander
confirmed.
Sims?
No, it's not confirmed which Alex will stay and which will leave, right? So,
exactly. So
but-
that is not confirmed. But if you ask me, there's so much availability next season and the season after that I won't be surprised if Dilbagh Singh goes and grabs up the two best drivers on the grid for the Gen 3 season in a year and a half.
Exactly. But see, Audi and BMW are also leaving, right? So Formula E will be left with just 9 teams at the end of the Gen 2 era, right? So they will definitely be looking for some teams to join in, some manufacturers or privateer teams, and that would obviously create more opportunity for all these drivers and newer drivers. So that is something to look into, what all new teams can join, because earlier in the year we also had rumors that someone from the Stellantis family will join Formula E. I mean, yeah, someone will join Formula E with Alfa Romeo in talks, but since Alfa Romeo has extended their contract with Sauber, someone else might join. So it's all very like Gen 3 is already exciting in itself. What prospects it's bringing, because we know that they are planning for supercharging and all those stuff. So yeah, new teams, new drivers, new cars.
Absolutely, but like, I think I've said this time and again throughout our Formula E talks this year, that I don't understand what, obviously I'm not a part of Audi, BMW or Mercedes, but it'll be interesting to hear from the team bosses and the management as to why they have decided to pull out of Formula E, because from what we have heard, Formula E is not as big of a financial commitment as some of the other motorsport racing series are, which is why we don't have as many teams or as many constructors joining them. But especially after most of these constructors, Audi, Mercedes and BMW, have had great results in the season throughout their time in Formula E. So it's really surprising to see them pull out right before a new generation of cars coming in. And I'd love to know more about it, and hear as to why the company and the team decided to pull out in
Yeah.
Gen 3. And it'll be interesting to see how the customer teams are also affected, because we know that I think Mercedes supplies to Envision Virgin Racing.
No, Mercedes
they- they're
supplies to Rocket Venturi,
Rocket Venturi, yeah, and then
and
Envision
Audi
Virgin
supplies
Racing
to
also
Virgin Racing.
absolutely. So it'll be interesting to see where those two customer teams end up and how their relationship changes, over the next season, and especially for Envision Virgin Racing. How I don't know if they've announced who they're switching to for the next season, but nonetheless, it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Exactly, and as you said, like these are the three biggest car manufacturers, the three most iconic car manufacturers of all time, and I mean it's just surprising that they are stepping away from electric motorsports when electric motorsports is like the future as such, right?
I mean, absolutely, because without them, the only car manufacturers we have left in the sport is Jaguar, Mahindra, Nissan, and Porsche.
And
So I
DS,
guess
DS.
and DS Cheetah, but it
I mean they are not. Yeah,
it just goes over my head as to what is the bigger game plan, because yeah, I just don't know. I just don't know what to say here, and it's just for me as a motorsport fan, it's disheartening to see these teams leave Formula E. I think I've had a great time watching them race, and it's just disappointing.
I mean, see, Audi and BMW were still okay because they have been in Formula E for a long time, and they might have some other plans, and they were not performing at the moment, right? But Mercedes, I mean, they just stepped into Formula E, and they were performing from day one. I'm just, yeah, I could
Baffled,
not, I could not,
absolutely.
gather my thoughts after that news.
Absolutely. But a lot to look forward to regarding Formula E. The 2021-2022 season starts in 2022 for some reason, but that will be the last season of Gen 2. So season 8 will be the last season for Gen 2 cars. We'll be going to Diriyah, Mexico City, Cape Town, China, Italy, Monaco, Berlin, Vancouver, New York, London, and South Korea. So a few different places, a lot more excitement, and a lot more to look forward to. One thing I want to mention is though kind of disappointing end to the season for Mahindra Racing. They didn't have a great season overall. They started really slow. They were in the back of the grid, but they made it up a few places. They were running 7th at one point in the championship, but they finished 9th with 132 points. That one win for Alex Lynn, I think in London, was the highlight of the season for Mahindra Racing. But I expected a lot more from them, especially after the success they had with Pascal Wehrlein in the car a couple of seasons ago. But I would definitely want them to do a lot more better next season.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as Indians, we are Mahindra fans, right? But as you said, it was disheartening to see because Mahindra has been on an upward trend for the past few seasons. And I mean, Alex Lynn was in Group 1 of going into the Berlin weekend. So, and he had a double no point score. So that's just, it's just strange what's happening at Mahindra. But yeah, Oliver Rowland is a shrewd operator. He wants to fight, and I think, I think that can be, that can bring some motivation into the team themselves.
Yeah, I guess. But it's just funny because going into the weekend, we were talking about how you don't want to be a championship leader, looking at the trend from the previous weekends, where the championship leaders didn't score any points throughout the next weekend.
Yeah.
And that is somewhat what happened with, similar things happened with Nyck de Vries, but he got lucky and he ended up still leading the championship at the end of the Berlin weekend, only scoring 4 points. So, great from, I think, two of these tweets of today, captured some of the sentiments of the Formula One fans who've been following Formula E this season. The first tweet from @Formula Shumi. Nyck saw F1 Twitter fighting over who would win the F1 championship in 2021 and said, "Let me give you both a Dutch win and a Mercedes win together." And then Alex Jacques F1 tweeted, "Motorsport is a simple thing, drivers travel the world to race at different circuits, and in the end, Mercedes win. Huge congratulations to Nyck de Vries and the Mercedes EQ Formula One team." So, I think those two tweets captured our emotions as well as F1 fans, giving us both a Dutch win and a Mercedes win. But again, it's just, this season has been such a roller coaster, consistently inconsistent. We generally say that about the FIA, but that's what the teams have been in Formula E this season, and that's given us a great, show. However, I will bring the conversation back to something a little more boring per se. And so I've followed Formula E over the last few seasons, but I never got really invested in it from a championship point of view. And this was like my first season that I followed from the start to the very end, and got really involved with it. And we have talked about this time and again that the qualifying format really messes with the championship standings and the way the season progresses. And I couldn't agree more. Having seen how the season has developed, and especially the championship fight towards the end of the season. I think I'm not a big fan of this qualifying format, and I really, really think that Formula E should look at changing it sooner or later. But sooner is better. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, see, the reason they use this format is twofold, right? Firstly, it gives us exciting racing, because the faster cars are at the back and the slower cars per se are ahead of them, right? So that gives us exciting racing, overtakes and all that stuff. And secondly, the championship, as we saw in the past last weekend, the championship is too tight. I mean, it's just a matter of few points between first and fifth and sixth, right? So while the motivation behind it is obviously correct, because that's what we live for, that's what we want to see in motorsports, the way they go about it, and if you have a bad weekend, like we saw with Sam Bird, right? He won a race, he went into the top Q1 group for the next weekend, and he scored 0 points in both the races, and that happened to him twice or thrice, I guess. I don't remember, but that's the thing. It's just so inconsistent. And as we saw with Nyck de Vries, he was in Group 1 heading into this weekend. I don't know where he qualified, but he didn't score any points. Luckily for him, he stayed in Group 1, because heading into the weekend, he said, "I could not be any unluckier." Because if you are a championship leader, you don't, I mean, if you are a championship leader heading into the last weekend, you are bound to lose the championship.
And that is exactly what our thoughts were, going into this weekend and going into round 16, especially after what happened in round 15 with De Vries still, leading the championship, which is why Mitch Evans was a favorite after qualifying, because he was the only one from the top 6 who put it into Super Pole and had the best chance of, coming home with a huge score of points. But unlucky for him. But which is why, before round 15 this morning, I was of the opinion that someone who was not in Group 1 would take away the championship at the end of the day, unless they were really unlucky. But that didn't happen. But if I were to bet my money on it, that is what I would have done going into
absolutely
the race day today.
Absolutely. I mean, see, we have talked about this issue several times. The drivers are not happy. The teams are not happy. The fans obviously are not happy, because most of the times we don't know what's happening, right? The regulations in Formula E are so complex regarding the energy usage and all that stuff. But I think, see, I don't see any changes next season because it's the same cars. It's like the Gen 2 cars carry forward, continue, right? And it's just one season before Gen 3. So I don't expect any changes at all for next season. I hope that in Gen 3 they can incorporate better racing if they get a better car, like a better racing car. If they get a bit better racing car, they can tweak the weekend format.
Absolutely. And another thing, we've been to a lot of tracks this season, and I think we've talked about it this time and again. A lot of times, some of the tracks we've been, especially I think London and then Mexico, and there have been different problems with the track. Some tracks are a little too narrow. Some tracks, are just crumbly, like we had in Mexico in Puebla.
Yeah.
I feel like we were in Rome in Italy earlier this season. That was a really narrow track, and I think Berlin is a good example of a good circuit which can produce good racing without too many collisions, and has enough space for drivers to be racy while not putting each other into the wall as much as at other tracks. So I think the Formula E organizers might want to look at that and make the tracks wider, a little more better suited to racing than just having really tight and twisty corners and making it basically a single lap, a single file, race, which ends up in people crashing into each other. That's not something we want to see. We want to see some nice, good racing, and we don't really want to see people crashing into the walls or into each other while trying to give us a good show.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the way Formula E tracks are made, I think they can do a lot better because, we see in Berlin, right? It's an empty field. It's an empty concrete field, and they create a track out of nothing. So I think places like these and even city centers, we can create much better tracks, much better racing tracks. Nobody expected Formula E to be exciting in Monaco, but it was, and that's what we want to see. And I'll be honest, I missed Marrakesh and Santiago a lot this season, and unfortunately we don't have both these circuits next season as well. But those were two good racing circuits.
Absolutely. But, great season. We had a lot of fun watching it, talking about it, and we just can't wait for January 16th to come around soon enough. And that's all from my side. Without any closing thoughts from you about the Formula E Championship we have had this season.
Well, see, this was the first time I was following Formula E as properly, right? As you said.
It was our first time following the entire championship from the start
Exactly,
to end, and
right.
we really invested in it.
And I knew Formula E can be inconsistent and, several winners and all these ups and downs. But I never expected this. It was carnage. It was a roller coaster. And while we enjoyed it, I think we need a bit calmer championship. What do you say?
I couldn't agree more, but great to see Nyck de Vries win. Congratulations to him. Congratulations to the Mercedes EQ Formula E team. Heartbreak for Jaguar Racing, heartbreak for Mitch Evans, but what can you do? It is motorsport, and we'll see them next season once again. Thank you, Vedant, for joining me once again today to talk about Formula E, and I'll catch you on the next one.